There's a moment that happens to most people every single day, and almost no one notices it the first 100 times it happens. The phone vibrates, the email arrives, the person at the meeting turns and asks, casually, if you can do something. And before any conscious thought reaches the surface, before you have actually checked with yourself about whether you want to, whether you have the time, whether saying yes will cost you something, a word forms in your mouth. It is yes. And you watch yourself say it. Not because you decided, because saying yes is what you have always done. It is not just the yes that you didn't mean. It is the opinion you softened so it would land more gently, even though the softer version was no longer what you thought. It is the apology you offered for something that was not your fault, just to dissolve the discomfort in the room. It is the disagreement you swallowed, the boundary you let slide, the explanation you kept giving long after the other person had stopped caring whether you explained. Each of these moments seems small in isolation. None of them feels like a betrayal. But strung together, day after day, year after year, they form something the Stoics recognized clearly 2,000 years ago. A quiet, almost invisible trade in which you are exchanging pieces of yourself for the temporary approval of people who, in most cases, will not even remember the moment of exchange. And here's the part almost no one wants to admit. The trade is rational. It is not, as the modern self-help industry sometimes suggests, the behavior of weak people. It is the behavior of people who learned very early that being agreeable kept them safe, that being accommodating earned them love, that softening edges and dissolving tension was the social skill that worked. They were not wrong. Being skilled at making others comfortable is a real skill, and it has helped you in ways you can probably count. The Stoics would never have told you that being kind to others, being attentive, being thoughtful about how your words land, that any of this is wrong. What they understood with unusual precision is that there is a line. On one side of the line, your kindness comes from strength, from a choice you make, fully, because you want to. On the other side of the line, your kindness comes from fear, from a pattern your nervous system runs to avoid the cost of disagreement. The behavior looks identical from the outside. The internal cost is the difference between a life that is yours and a life that has been quietly painted over by everyone else's expectations. What follows is 7 Stoic lessons for the person who is starting to suspect they have been on the wrong side of that line for longer than they realized. 7 mechanisms for noticing the trade as it happens. 7 reasons that the peace you have been buying with self-betrayal was never peace at all. It was a kind of slow surrender that you mistook for harmony. The 7th is the one that ties all the others together, and it is the one most people are not yet ready to hear. Stay for it. Welcome to Logostoic. What you are about to hear is not a lecture about being more assertive or learning to say no. It is something deeper. It is an examination of the most common, most invisible form of self-loss in modern life. The kind that hides inside politeness, inside kindness, inside the social rewards your behavior keeps generating. The Stoics built a precise philosophy for catching this pattern and reversing it without becoming cold, without becoming aggressive, without becoming someone you would not want to be. If you have been quietly trading pieces of yourself for the approval of people who never asked for them, and almost no one in modern life will ever name this for you out loud, this video is for you. Like the video, subscribe to Logostoic, and stay for every one of these 7 lessons. They build on each other, and the 7th ties them all together. If you are ready to stop trading yourself, prove it. Comment now. I stopped trading myself. Now let's begin. Lesson 1. Nice is often fear wearing the mask of virtue. There is a question worth holding before we go any further into this. Where did the pattern come from? Almost no one is born with the instinct to soften every disagreement, to apologize for taking up space, to perform constant accommodation. The pattern is learned. It is usually learned very early, in the place where most patterns are learned, the family, the school, the first peer group, the first place where the social cost of disagreement was registered by a young nervous system that had not yet developed the resources to handle being disliked. A child notices that a particular kind of behavior earns warmth, and a different kind earns withdrawal. The child is not stupid. The child responds to the data. And by the time the response has been performed 10,000 times across a childhood, it is no longer a response. It is a feature of the personality, invisible to the person performing it, unmistakable to anyone trying to know them. Consider what society has taught most people to admire: the agreeable colleague, the accommodating friend, the partner who never creates tension, who absorbs disagreement before it has time to surface, who keeps every room emotionally smooth. These people are praised constantly. They are called kind, generous, easy to be around. Almost no one asks the question that the Stoics would have asked immediately: where exactly is this kindness coming from? Because there are two completely different places it can come from, and they look identical from the outside. The first is real kindness, a choice made from a steady internal place, offered freely because the person genuinely cares and has the inner resources to give without depleting themselves. The second is something else entirely. It is fear wearing the mask of virtue. It is a nervous system that has learned that disagreement leads to rejection, that conflict leads to punishment, that disapproval feels like a small social death, and so it preempts all of those outcomes by being maximally agreeable all the time with everyone. The behavior is identical, the cost is not, and the person performing it usually cannot tell in real time which of the two they are doing. Epictetus, who spent his early life as a slave and knew the difference between performed obedience and chosen virtue better than almost any philosopher in history, said something simple and difficult about this. Virtue, he insisted, has to be a choice. The moment your behavior is driven by fear of the consequences of not behaving that way, it is no longer virtue. It is survival. There is no moral credit in a kindness you could not have refused. The praise the world heaps on the agreeable person is, in many cases, praise for a survival mechanism the person never consciously chose. Here's the test the Stoics would put to anyone trying to distinguish the two in themselves. Imagine that the entire social reward system disappeared. No one would know what you decided. No one would think more or less of you. No one would withdraw their warmth or extend additional gratitude. Would you still do the kind thing? If the answer is yes, you have located genuine kindness. If the answer is some version of, well, I would still feel obligated, or well, I would feel guilty if I didn't, you have located something else. You have located the fear that has been calling itself virtue for so long that you can no longer tell the two apart. And here is what almost no one talks about: the hidden cost that builds underneath this kind of performed niceness. Resentment. Quietly, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the person who keeps saying yes when they meant no begins to accumulate a debt, a private ledger of all the times they gave when they did not want to, all the moments they swallowed what they actually thought, all the energy they expended maintaining a politeness their inner life did not endorse. The ledger does not stay private forever. It leaks. It leaks into burnout that the person cannot explain. It leaks into irritation at people who never did anything wrong, only happened to be standing in front of them when the ledger finally overflowed. It leaks into the strange exhaustion that follows social interactions that should have been easy. The kindness that came from fear was never free. It was being charged to an account the person was not consciously checking, and the bill, when it arrives, always seems to come from somewhere mysterious. It does not. It came from every yes that should have been a no. There is one more piece of this that is worth naming, because almost no one names it out loud. The performed kindness is not just expensive for the person performing it. It is, in a strange way, unfair to the people receiving it. The friend who is being told what they want to hear is not actually being heard. The partner whose hardest decisions are met with automatic agreement is not actually being supported. The colleague whose questionable idea was never honestly challenged is being denied a real reflection. Performed niceness gives people the social experience of being liked, while denying them the deeper experience of being known. They sense it, even if they cannot name it. They begin to feel slightly unsettled in your presence without being able to explain why. The reason is that there is no one actually there. There is only a careful management of how they are receiving you, and nothing about that management is the love that they actually need. You have been calling fear by the name of virtue for so long that the two have started to feel like the same thing. They are not. Stop performing kindness. Drop the mask now. You are stronger than your fear. You can be kind without being afraid. Type below, do it now. I drop the mask. Lesson 2. Approval is an addiction, and you're paying the tax daily. There is a particular kind of dependency that almost never gets named in modern language because it is socially rewarded at every turn. It is the addiction to approval. Like every other addiction, it operates through a reward withdrawal cycle that the person caught in it cannot easily see from the inside. Someone gives you a small social signal of approval, a smile, a thank you, a compliment, the feeling that you have been accepted into a group, and a small chemical reward arrives in your brain. The reward feels good. It also feels safe because approval has been wired in your nervous system as proof that you will not be excluded, will not be rejected, will not face the ancient evolutionary threat of being alone. And then, like every addiction, the reward fades. The compliment was an hour ago. The smile happened yesterday. The feeling of acceptance from this group will not survive into tomorrow unless something happens to renew it. And so the behavior begins again. The agreeableness, the accommodating, the careful management of how you are being perceived. Not because you consciously chose to do it, but because the absence of the next dose has started to feel like discomfort. Epictetus put this with characteristic directness when he told his students that if you want to improve, you must be content to be thought foolish and stupid. The line is not about humility. It is about freedom. As long as praise is necessary for your emotional stability, criticism will be enough to destabilize you. The two cannot be separated. To be unable to bear criticism is to be controlled by anyone willing to give it. There's a particular feeling that goes with peak approval dependency, and it is worth being able to recognize because it is often misinterpreted as something more flattering than it actually is. The feeling is hypervigilance disguised as social skill. The chronic approval seeker is constantly scanning. They are reading the room. They are picking up on small shifts in tone, in body language, in the energy of the person across from them. They are adjusting their own behavior in real time based on what they detect. From the outside, this looks like emotional intelligence. From the inside, it is exhausting because the scanning never stops. There is no situation in which the person gets to simply be present. Every interaction is also a small surveillance operation conducted on themselves in service of an audience that never asked for the performance. This is not what emotional intelligence is supposed to feel like. Real emotional intelligence is grounded. The hypervigilant version is depleted every time, regardless of how well the interaction goes. Now consider what this addiction looks like in someone with high awareness and good intentions, because this is where it becomes truly insidious. The chronic approval seeker is not stupid. Often they are highly intelligent, highly observant, highly capable of analyzing other people's behavior. What has happened to them is more subtle than simple weakness. Their internal measure of what counts as winning has been quietly rewritten. The original definition, winning means living a life that aligns with my values, my talents, my honest preferences, has been overwritten by a new definition. Winning means being well received. Winning means avoiding any moment of social discomfort. Winning means leaving every room with everyone in it feeling good about me. And because both definitions can produce a feeling that resembles satisfaction, the person caught in the second one genuinely believes they are winning. They are not. They are being depleted, but their internal scoreboard has been calibrated to register depletion as victory. This is the truly dangerous part. A person whose scoreboard is broken cannot fix the scoreboard with the scoreboard. They cannot simply think their way out, because the very mechanism they would use to evaluate whether they are okay is the mechanism that has been compromised. Every check-in returns the same misleading result. I'm fine. People like me. The relationships are working. Why am I exhausted? Why does giving feel like depletion? Why do I sometimes feel resentment toward people who, by all reasonable measures, have not done anything wrong to me? The questions do not get answered because the answer would require recognizing that the scoreboard itself is broken. And the scoreboard is the only tool the person has been using to assess their own life. The tax is paid daily in small denominations, a softened opinion here, A preemptive apology there. A yes that should have been a maybe that should have been a no. None of the individual payments would seem worth noticing if you saw it on a single day. Multiply by 365. Multiply by 10 years. Calculate what has been spent. The Stoics understood that small daily betrayals compound into a life that eventually does not feel like yours. Not because of any dramatic decision, but because the daily tax of approval-seeking quietly purchased a different life than the one you would have built if praise had been optional rather than necessary. The recalibration of the scoreboard is, in the end, the only way out. It is not a quick fix. It is the slow, deliberate work of installing a new measure of what counts as winning, a measure that includes your own honest preferences, your own sustainable energy, your own actual values, alongside the legitimate consideration of other people. The new scoreboard does not refuse to register what others want. It refuses to register only what others want. The difference is small in language and enormous in practice. A person living under the old scoreboard cannot tell whether they are okay because every internal signal has been routed through the approval of others. A person living under the rebuilt scoreboard checks two things in every situation. What do I actually want, and what does this situation actually require, and treats both as real data. The first question is not selfish. It is simply data that for years had been thrown away. You have been paying the tax of approval seeking every single day for years. You have not noticed because everyone around you has been collecting it quietly. Stop paying. See the tax for what it is. You are not weak. You just never counted the cost. Stop the payments now. Comment below. Do it now. I stop paying the tax. Lesson 3. Your nervous system mistakes discomfort for danger. The body keeps a record that the conscious mind often misses. Long before a person can articulate that they have been overextending themselves, their body has been signaling, through tension in the shoulders, through the strange flatness that arrives at the end of social days, through the way their breath shortens before certain conversations. These signals are not symptoms of something wrong with the person. They are accurate readings of a cost that is being paid. The discipline of attention that the Stoics called prosoche begins by trusting these signals as data, not dismissing them as anxiety to be overridden. Watch what happens in your body the next time someone disagrees with you in conversation. Watch carefully. For most people, something tightens. The heart rate moves up a notch. The breath shortens. There's a small surge of something that feels like an emergency, even though the actual situation is, by any reasonable measure, completely safe. No one is going to hurt you. No one is going to leave you. No one is going to withdraw the love you depend on. And yet the body has registered the moment as a threat. The Stoics, who lacked the modern vocabulary of nervous systems and stress responses, nonetheless understood the underlying pattern with remarkable accuracy. Seneca put it in a sentence that has been quoted ever since: "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." The reality was a disagreement. The imagination has converted it into a danger. This conversion is the engine of self-betrayal. It is what makes the trade happen automatically, before conscious thought can intervene. A person who has spent years learning that disagreement leads to bad outcomes will not need to consciously decide to soften their opinion in tense conversations. The softening will happen on its own before they notice. Their tone will adjust. Their statements will become less definite. They will laugh at things that were not funny, agree with statements they actually disputed, and apologize for the existence of their own perspective. And none of this will feel like a decision, because none of it was. It was the nervous system doing what it has learned to do: dissolve tension before tension can deliver the consequences it has been taught to fear. Notice the behaviors that betray this pattern, because they are highly observable once you know what to look for. The person who rushes to fill silence whenever a conversation pauses, because the silence itself has become unbearable. The person who laughs nervously after making a serious point, as if to soften the impact of having had an opinion. The person who over-explains a simple decision, justifying it from every possible angle, even though no one has questioned it. The person who apologizes preemptively before anyone has actually expressed displeasure. None of these behaviors is, on its own, evidence of weakness or pathology. Each of them, repeated thousands of times across a lifetime, is evidence of a nervous system that has been trained to treat ordinary social tension as something requiring immediate emotional intervention. And the intervention is almost always at the expense of the person performing it. The Stoic response to this is not to suppress the feeling. The Stoics were not promoters of emotional coldness, despite the modern caricature. What they trained was the pause, the small, deliberate moment of space between the body's reaction and the behavior that would normally follow. They called this prosoch, attention, awareness, the discipline of noticing what is happening internally without immediately acting on it. The discomfort arrives, the body tightens, the impulse to dissolve the tension surges, and instead of obeying the impulse instantly, the trained person observes it. They notice that what they are feeling is not danger, but the conditioned response to discomfort. They notice that nothing in the actual situation requires the dissolution. And in that small moment of noticing, they regain the capacity to choose. Sometimes they choose to be agreeable anyway, because the moment genuinely calls for it. Sometimes they choose to hold their position, because dissolving it would be a betrayal of something they actually believe. The point is not always to refuse. The point is to recover the choice. Once this practice begins to take hold, something quiet starts to shift. Tension stops feeling like an emergency. Disagreement stops feeling like rejection. The body still tightens. That part of the conditioning takes years to undo, but the tightening no longer dictates behavior. There is now a small space between what you feel and what you do. And in that small space, an entire life is recoverable. There is a practical way to begin training this pause, and it does not require meditation retreats or years of philosophy study. The next time you feel the small surge of urgency to dissolve a tense moment, to fill a silence, to soften a position, to apologize preemptively, pause for the count of 3 before doing anything, just 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, observe what your body is telling you, not the situation, the body, the tightness in the chest, the shallow breath, the slight rush of something that feels like alarm, and ask internally one question: is what I am about to do a response to the actual situation, or a response to the discomfort I am feeling about the situation? The two are not the same. The first might require a real adjustment. The second is your nervous system asking you to betray something. 3 seconds. That is all. And it is enough, repeated daily, to slowly retrain a pattern that has been running for decades. You have been treating ordinary discomfort like an emergency for so long that you cannot remember what calm even feels like in a tense moment. It is not danger, it is just discomfort. Reclaim the pause. You are not in danger. Tension is not threat. You can hold your ground without breaking. Type below, do it now. Tension is not danger. Lesson 4. Real kindness requires a spine. Here is the distinction that, if you take nothing else from this video, is worth holding for the rest of your life. Real kindness comes from 2 sources working together: the heart and the reason. The heart provides the warmth, the capacity to feel what another person is feeling, the genuine impulse to ease someone else's burden. But the heart alone is not enough. Without the reason, the heart spends itself recklessly, giving to people who do not need it, depleting itself for situations that did not require the depletion, mistaking everyone's distress for your responsibility. The reason provides the structure. It is the part of you that knows your own value, that knows the worth of your own time and energy, that knows that the heart you have was not given to you only for other people. Half of it belongs to you. That half is not a withdrawal of love from the world. It is the foundation that allows the other half to give without collapsing. A person who has trained only the heart becomes a kind of well that everyone draws from until it is dry, and then has nothing left to give, including to the people who actually depend on them. A person who has trained only the reason becomes calculating and cold, treating relationships as transactions, and missing the genuine warmth that makes connection real. The Stoic ideal is the integration of both, a heart wide enough to feel deeply, and a reason disciplined enough to direct that feeling intelligently. Not less love, better directed love, not less kindness, kindness that includes the kindness you owe yourself. There is a story from Roman antiquity that illustrates the spine kindness requires. and it features a Stoic philosopher named Agrippinus who lived under Emperor Nero. Nero, who had a particular interest in being adored by everyone in his court, decided that members of the Roman elite should perform in his theatrical productions, singing, acting, generally entertaining the emperor at his command. For most senators and aristocrats, this was an impossible position. Refusing the emperor was politically dangerous, possibly lethal. Accepting was a humiliation. Most found a way to comply, telling themselves that it was just one performance, that it was politically wise, that refusal would help no one. Agrippinus refused. When his friends asked him why risk his life, his career, his social standing for something so apparently small as not singing in the emperor's play, his answer was the kind of sentence Stoic students have memorized ever since. Why should I be a hindrance to myself? He did not refuse because he was contemptuous of Nero or trying to make a political point or seeking martyrdom. He refused because, for him, singing in that play was a betrayal of who he was. And he had decided long before that day that he would not be the person standing in the way of his own life. Most of the time, the test is not as dramatic as defying an emperor. Most of the time, the test arrives in the form of an ordinary request, a favor, an invitation, an expectation of your time and energy that you do not feel aligned with, but that refusing will be socially uncomfortable. And here is the practical instrument the Stoics would offer for catching the difference between true kindness and self-betrayal in that moment. Ask yourself one question before you answer. If no one would ever know what I decided here, would I still want to do this? Not whether you should, whether you want to. The question strips away the social pressure, the desire to be seen as good, the anxiety about how your refusal will be interpreted. What is left is the honest answer. If the answer is yes, if, in a world with no audience, you would still want to do the thing, then doing it is kindness from strength. If the answer is no, if, without the social pressure, you would not have agreed, then doing it anyway is self-betrayal dressed as kindness, and you should know what you are doing before you do it. There's also a body signal that goes with this, and once you learn to notice it, it becomes almost impossible to miss. Real kindness expands the body. The breath stays open. Energy moves outward easily. There is a quiet sense of giving from a full place. Self-betrayal contracts the body. The chest tightens. The breath becomes shallow. There is often an internal voice immediately defending the decision before anyone has questioned it. I should help, it's the right thing, I would feel guilty if I didn't. The defensive voice is the tell. Real kindness does not need to justify itself before it acts, it just acts. The internal lawyer only shows up when something is being violated. And once you have noticed this lawyer once you have heard yourself in real time, constructing the case for why you should agree to something your body is telling you not to agree to, you cannot unhear it. The lawyer will appear again, and the next time you will recognize the voice. You will know what it is doing. That recognition, repeated, is the beginning of the work of distinguishing the kindness you actually want to give from the kindness you have been performing out of fear that not performing it would be unbearable. You have been calling self-betrayal by the name of kindness for so long that you no longer notice the contraction in your own chest. Listen to your body. Choose from strength, not fear. You can be kind without abandoning yourself. Your heart and your reason both matter. Write it down. Do it now. I choose kindness from strength. Lesson 5. You do not owe everyone an explanation. Watch how a person who has lost their inner authority speaks. There is a tell, and once you learn to see it, you will see it everywhere, including in yourself. Every statement comes wrapped in qualifications, justifications, anticipations of how the listener might object. A simple decision becomes a 5-minute defense. A no becomes a paragraph explaining why the no is not a personal rejection, not an indication of dislike, not a sign of any failure on the listener's part. The over-explainer is not actually communicating more clearly. They are doing something else entirely. They are asking for permission to have made the decision in the first place. Permission they have already given themselves intellectually, but that some deeper part of them still does not believe they are allowed to grant. Epictetus offered a sentence that, once internalized, will save you thousands of hours of unnecessary explanation across the rest of your life. We have, he observed, 2 ears and 1 mouth, that we may listen twice as much as we speak. The line is usually quoted as a recommendation for listening more. It is also, more subtly, a recommendation for explaining less. The person who is internally grounded does not need to verbally process every decision in front of an audience. They have already processed it internally. They state the conclusion. They allow the listener to react. They do not feel obligated to defend the conclusion against objections that have not yet been raised, or to repair misunderstandings that have not yet occurred, or to anticipate criticisms that exist only in their own anxious imagination. Their words carry weight precisely because there are fewer of them, and because the ones that exist have been chosen rather than spilled. Here is the mechanism that turns ordinary communication into over-explanation, and it is worth understanding because it operates beneath conscious awareness. When you explain a decision more than the decision actually requires, you are not communicating. You are unconsciously asking the listener to validate the decision. Each additional sentence is a small request for permission. Each justification is an offering. Please accept this reason as adequate. Please tell me the choice was acceptable. Please confirm that I am still in the social good graces of this person, whose approval I have not stopped needing. The listener usually senses this, even if they cannot articulate it. The energy of the over-explanation is unmistakable. It communicates, beneath the words, that the speaker is uncertain, not about the content, but about their right to have made the choice at all. The discipline the Stoics trained here is what they called economy of speech, saying only what needs to be said, and then allowing silence to do the rest of the work. Not curt, not cold, just contained. A concise answer delivered calmly carries more weight than a long, emotional defense, because restraint communicates internal order. It suggests that the person speaking has thought before opening their mouth, that they have considered what is necessary and what is excess, and that they do not need the listener's reassurance to remain stable in the position they have taken. People notice this even when they cannot explain why. They begin to trust the quieter speaker more than the louder one, not because the quieter speaker is more capable, but because the quietness signals something the words alone cannot signal. It signals that the speaker is not panicking beneath the surface. The practice is simple to describe and difficult to live. The next time you find yourself about to explain a decision that does not require an explanation, pause. Notice the impulse. Ask yourself whether anyone has actually asked for justification, and whether the justification you are about to offer is going to clarify anything, or is just going to perform the ritual of asking for permission you have already given yourself. If it is the second, stop talking. State the decision. Let the silence be. The discomfort you feel in that silence is not evidence that you should have explained more. It is evidence that you have been over-explaining for so long that the absence of over-explanation feels like a void. The void closes on its own. Your unjustified silence will not destroy the relationship. What it will do is reveal slowly that you no longer require anyone else's authorization to live your own life. People who are trying to assess whether you are someone worth taking seriously will read your patterns of speech long before they read your arguments. A person who states a position cleanly, allows it to land, and does not rush to defend it against unspoken objections, that person communicates something the arguments themselves cannot. They communicate that the position was not improvised in the moment to win approval. It was already settled inside them before the conversation began. The listener does not have to agree with the position. They register, regardless, that the speaker is occupying their own ground rather than borrowing it from whoever is listening. This is the social currency that the over-explainer is constantly spending without realizing they are spending it. There is also a deeper cost to over-explanation that is worth naming. Every time you justify a decision more than the decision requires, you teach your own nervous system that the decision was not actually legitimate, that it needed the justification to count. The justification is a small instruction to yourself. This choice is suspect and must be defended. Repeat that instruction enough times across years, and you will start to genuinely believe, at a level beneath conscious thought, that your decisions are not by default legitimate. They become legitimate only after the appropriate explanatory ritual has been performed. This is one of the most subtle ways a person loses internal authority. Not because anyone took it away, because they kept performing the ritual that suggested it had to be earned. You've been asking permission for decisions you have already made. The asking is the leak. Stop justifying yourself to people who never demanded it. Close the mouth, stand in the decision. You do not need permission to be yourself. Type below, do it now. I owe no one an explanation. Lesson 6. Boundaries are filters, not walls. Almost everyone who struggles with self-betrayal has a particular block around the word boundary. They have heard it used in modern self-help so often that it has come to sound like emotional armor, a wall that cuts people off, a confrontation, an act of aggression against the relationships they care about. This framing is wrong, and the Stoics would have rejected it immediately. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. A wall keeps everyone out. A filter determines what flows through and what does not. A person without filters is not generous. A person without filters is a person whose energy, time, and attention are available to everyone, including to people who would never offer the same in return and who would not even value it if it were given. Unlimited access is not love. It is the absence of any system that distinguishes between what deserves access and what does not. Consider how human beings naturally treat what is freely available. The thing that is always there, always offered, always accessible, does it receive respect? Almost never. Human nature, for reasons that have to do with both psychology and economics, calibrates value through scarcity. When a person's attention is unlimited, their attention is treated as if it costs nothing. When a person's time is endlessly available, their time is given the value of free. When a person's energy can be drawn on at any moment without consequence, others draw on it without thinking, often without even noticing they are doing so. This is not because people are villains. It is because they are responding, consciously or unconsciously, to the signals the system has been sending them. The signal an unfiltered person sends is, my access has no cost, and so the cost is not paid. Not because anyone is malicious, because the price tag was never displayed. Here's where the Stoic philosophy of dichotomy of control becomes practical, and where it most directly applies to the work of building boundaries that hold. The mistake most people make when they begin to set limits is that they try to set them by changing the other person, by making them understand, by getting them to agree, by extracting a promise that they will treat you differently going forward. None of this works. You cannot change another person. You can only change yourself. The boundary, properly understood, is not a request you make of someone else. It is a decision you make about your own behavior. What will I say yes to? What will I say no to? What access does my time, my energy, my attention require to be granted? These are questions about you, not about them, and the answers are within your control regardless of how the other person responds to them. This is why the strongest boundaries are almost never announced. The person who has to repeatedly explain their boundaries to others has, in most cases, not yet truly established them, because announcing a boundary is a way of asking someone to enforce it for you. Real boundaries are enforced by behavior, the unanswered text, the declined invitation that does not require a multi-paragraph justification. The conversation politely concluded when it had begun to drift into territory that depletes you. None of these requires speeches. None of them requires confrontation. They require only that you actually behave differently and continue to behave differently when the other person tests, as they will test, whether the new pattern is real or whether it can be argued back into the old shape. And here is the part almost no one expects. When boundaries become real, when they are enforced through behavior rather than announced through speeches, most relationships do not collapse. They recalibrate. The people who were drawing on your unlimited access begin, almost unconsciously, to draw less. They notice that something has changed. They cannot always name what it is. They adjust. Some of them, the ones who valued you only because of the unlimited access, will fade. Their fading is not your failure. Their fading is information you needed to have. The people who remain are the people who valued you for something beyond the access. And those relationships, once the filter has been installed, often become stronger than they ever were when the access had no cost. The Stoic insight here is sharp. Your filters do not destroy the relationships worth keeping. They reveal which ones were worth keeping in the first place. There's also a perspective on boundaries that almost no one frames this way, and it's worth ending with. A well-installed boundary is not just a gift to yourself. It is, paradoxically, a gift to the other person. The person who has unlimited access to you is being trained by your unfilterable availability to expect a kind of access that does not actually exist anywhere else in healthy adult life. They are being set up for the moment when that access has to end, through your eventual collapse, through accumulated resentment, through the unsustainable cost of giving without reciprocity. The boundary, installed early, teaches them the actual shape of how mature relationships function. It teaches them that your time has weight, that your attention is real, that the connection between you is built on something more durable than your endless willingness to absorb their demands. That teaching, for the people who matter, is the foundation of a real relationship. For the people who do not matter, the ones who only valued the unlimited access, the boundary was always going to feel like a withdrawal of love. It was not. It was the absence of the dependency they had mistaken for love. Marcus Aurelius, who governed an empire and could have justified unlimited availability to anyone who demanded his time, understood this discipline at the highest level of practice. His journal records his daily struggle with people who wanted access: courtiers, advisors, supplicants, men with agendas, and his deliberate, conscious work to filter that access according to his principles rather than according to the loudness of the request. He did not refuse everyone. He refused the requests that, on examination, did not deserve his attention, and he gave generously, fully, to the requests that did. The result was not a cold emperor. It was an emperor who actually had enough left in him to be useful to the people he chose to help. The unfiltered ruler is exhausted by noon and useless by evening. The filtered ruler is steady all day and present where presence matters. The same logic applies to a life that is not an empire. You have been treating boundaries like walls when they are filters. You have been treating the absence of filters like love. Stop confusing the two. Install the filter. Your energy has value. Your time has value. Stop giving what was never meant to be free. Comment below. Do it now. My access has a cost. Lesson 7. Every time you betray yourself, you vote for who you become. Imagine your life as a painting that you are slowly creating, brushstroke by brushstroke, from the day you become conscious of having a self at all. In the beginning, the painting is yours. The choices about color, about composition, about what belongs and what does not, these are made by you, even if you do not yet understand that you are making them. And then somewhere along the way, someone asks for a brush. A parent who wants you to paint a particular shape over here. A teacher who wants the colors more restrained. A friend who wants the composition arranged for their convenience. A partner who wants the entire central section painted over. Each handing over of a brush feels small. Each one feels like a reasonable accommodation, a gesture of love, a willingness to let someone else have input on a painting that, after all, will affect them too. And so the brushes are handed out, one by one, often with genuine generosity. But the painting that emerges is, slowly, no longer the painting you would have made. The colors are negotiated. The composition is committee approved. The central image has been so heavily revised by other hands that you can no longer find the original beneath the layers. Marcus Aurelius, who governed an empire and could have lost himself in the demands of millions of people for his attention, wrote in his journal a line that returns to this exact problem. The true man, he said, is revealed in difficult times. The line is usually read as an observation about character under pressure. It can also be read another way. The true man, the actual, original self that you would have become if no one had ever borrowed your brushes, is most visible in the moments when betraying it would be easy and defending it would be hard. Each of those moments is a vote. You are voting for who you will be tomorrow. You are voting for whether the painting will recover something of its original direction, or whether another stroke will be applied by a hand that was not yours. Here is the trap almost no one sees, and it is the deepest reason self-betrayal is so difficult to escape. The trap is that self-betrayal does not just cost you in the present. It earns you a future inheritance you do not want, the right to be a victim. Every time you say yes when you meant no, you are putting away a small deposit in an account that will later pay out in resentment. When the exhaustion comes, and it will come, you will reach for the account. It was not my fault, you will tell yourself. I was just too kind. They took advantage of me. People do not appreciate what I do for them. The story will feel true because, in a literal sense, it is true. You did give, you were depleted, they did not appreciate it. But the story will leave out the small daily unforced votes you cast for the depletion. Every yes that should have been a no, every soften that should have been a stand, every brush you handed out to people who did not ask for one. The victim story is the reward for the self-betrayal. It pays you in moral high ground for a long emotional debt that you, alone, agreed to carry. It is, in this sense, the most expensive consolation prize available to a human being, and it is paid for in advance, every day, by you. The escape from this trap is not where most people expect it to be. Most people assume that the way out is to become more aware, to read more about boundaries, to understand the psychology of people-pleasing, to develop insight into one's own patterns. Awareness is necessary, but it is not sufficient. There is a particular failure mode in which a person spends years becoming exquisitely aware of their patterns without actually changing them, and the awareness itself becomes a substitute for change. They can describe people-pleasing in elegant terms. They can name every mechanism that drives it. And they still say yes the next time they meant no. Insight, by itself, does not move the needle. The needle is moved by action. By the first time you actually say no while every conditioned instinct in your body is screaming yes, that action is the beginning, not the awareness, the action. And this is where the Stoics would speak gently, not harshly, to the person beginning this work. There is a Vietnamese proverb that captures their spirit precisely. Duk tok but dat. Haste does not arrive. The painting was not painted over in a day. It will not be reclaimed in a day either. The first time you say no, you will probably do it badly. The second time, slightly less badly. By the 100th time, the muscle will be real. By the 1000th, the no will not feel like a defiance. It will feel like ordinary speech, the voice of a person who has, slowly and patiently, become themselves again. The Stoics knew that character is built in repetition, not in revelation. The work is long, the work is daily, and the work is, finally, the most worthwhile work a human being can do. Because the painting at the end, the painting that is actually yours, is the only painting that will ever feel like home. There is one more thing to say before this lesson closes, and it is a small kindness to the person who has been doing the wrong work for years. You did not become this through stupidity. You became this through skill. The pattern that is now costing you was once protecting you in conditions where protection was needed. The same intelligence that built the pattern can now dismantle it. You are not starting from zero. You are starting from a sophisticated adaptation that simply outlived its purpose. The work is not to punish that adaptation. The work is to thank it for what it did, and then to gently relieve it of a job it no longer needs to perform. Every yes that should have been a no was a vote for the person you are slowly becoming. The votes are still being cast. Cast them differently starting now. Pick up your own brush, reclaim your painting. You are not who you have been performing. You are who you choose next. Write in the comments, do it now. I paint my own life. 7 lessons. Nice is often fear, wearing the mask of virtue. Approval is an addiction, and the tax is paid daily. Your nervous system mistakes discomfort for danger. Real kindness comes from both heart and reason, and requires a spine. You do not owe everyone an explanation. Boundaries are filters, not walls. And every time you betray yourself, you are voting for who you become. These are not 7 separate problems with 7 separate fixes. They are 7 views of the same underlying reality. Somewhere along the way, you began trading pieces of yourself for the temporary approval of people who, in most cases, were not even asking for the trade. The trade became automatic. The painting that was supposed to be yours got revised by every hand that asked for a brush. And the strange thing that happens when you start to notice this is that the recognition itself begins to do work. You catch yourself in the middle of a yes that should have been a no. You feel the chest tighten before you have agreed to something that does not belong in your life. You hear the over-explanation forming in your mouth, and you stop. None of these moments is dramatic. None of them is the dramatic confrontation that the self-help books promise. They are small, daily, ordinary, and they are exactly how a life gets reclaimed. Remember the line from earlier. Real peace is not the peace you bought by betraying yourself. That peace was always counterfeit, a temporary ceasefire purchased with parts of you that you should never have been asked to surrender. Real peace is the steadiness that develops when you no longer require everyone in the room to approve of you in order to remain calm in your own skin. It is, in a quiet way, the most underrated form of freedom a human being can achieve. Because it is not freedom from external constraints, which most people imagine as freedom, but freedom from the internal constraint that has been doing the actual work of imprisoning them. The cage was inside. The key, it turns out, was also inside. That is what the Stoics knew, and what they spent their lives teaching anyone willing to listen, not as an abstract doctrine, but as a daily, lived, recoverable practice that anyone, in any century, can begin from wherever they happen to be standing right now. Duk tok but dat. Haste does not arrive. The painting that was overpainted for 30 years will not be restored in a weekend, but it will be restored, brushstroke by brushstroke, decision by decision, no by no, if the work is done patiently and without the demand for immediate dramatic results. The Stoics did not promise that this would be easy. They promised something better. They promised that the life on the other side of this work, the life of a person who no longer trades themselves for approval, who can be kind without being afraid, who can say no without rehearsing the explanation for a week beforehand, is a life that is actually worth living. And it is the only life that will ever feel like yours. Stop trading yourself for approval. Not because the people you have been pleasing are bad. Most of them are not. Stop because the trade was always uneven, the cost was always being charged to you, and the painting that was supposed to be your life is still recoverable. That is the whole of today's video. The work is to start voting differently, beginning today, in the next small decision you make. If this video reached the part of you that has been quietly trading itself for years, the part that has been carrying a debt of small daily betrayals you never agreed to pay, consider liking it. There are people right now scrolling through their phone at 3 a.m. who are exactly where you have been, and they will only find this perspective if those who recognize themselves in it carry it to them. Every like puts this in front of one more of them, and leave a comment. Of these 7 lessons, write down the one that hit hardest, the one that named a pattern you have been performing for so long that you stopped noticing it. Name it specifically. The Stoics believed that naming the pattern is the first real step out. The comments are full of people doing the same work, in real time, in their own lives. Add yours. The next person reading will know they are not alone in the painting. Subscribe to Logostoic, because the work of reclaiming a life from years of self-betrayal is not the work of one video. It is the work of returning, again and again, to the practices that teach you to choose your own brush, hold your own ground, and remain kind without becoming afraid. That is what this channel is built for. If that is the kind of strength you actually want, you have found the right place. May you stop trading yourself for approval that was never going to be enough. May your kindness, from now on, come from strength rather than from fear. And may the painting you are still making, the one that is finally beginning to look like yours again, turn out to be worth every patient brushstroke it takes to recover.